Welcome back to Burned Bridges Club. If you've ever been at the bottom, holding on to nothing but the last few dollars in your pocket, this one is for you. Stay with me to the end, because the way it turns is something I still think about. 3 weeks of work. That's what the rigging boss owed him when the man's phone finally went to a dead tone at 4 in the afternoon on the coldest day of spring. Cole stood in the gravel lot of a shuttered feed store and listened to that flat, mechanical nothing. And he understood, the way you understand a slap after it's already landed, that the money was gone. All of it. The paychecks that were supposed to cover the truck, the tank of diesel, the motel he'd been sleeping in on the promise of a payout that never came. 6 hours later, the sky over that stretch of Montana turned the color of an old bruise, and the wind came off the crazy mountains with teeth in it. Cole walked the shoulder of a county road with a canvas bag over one shoulder and $61 folded flat in his boot. His phone had died somewhere around noon. The truck was 2 towns back with a repo notice taped to the windshield. The first flakes hit sideways. Not the soft kind. The kind that stings. He'd been walking almost 2 days by then, and his feet had gone past aching into a dull, distant numbness he tried not to think about. He was 34 years old, and he had a trade in his hands. And he had exactly nothing else in the world. His mother had been gone 7 years. There was no one to call even if the phone had worked. That was when he saw the light. Down a long, rutted drive, past a leaning mailbox, a single yellow window burned warm against the dark. A ranch house, low and weathered, with a stovepipe breathing gray smoke into the storm. And off to the side, hunched against the wind like an old animal, stood a hay barn with a swayback roof. Cole stopped at the cattle gate. He hated asking. He'd hated it his whole life. But he hated the thought of lying down in a ditch and not getting up more. He walked to the door and knocked. Nothing, at first. Just the wind and the tick of ice against the siding. He knocked again, softer, already rehearsing the apology. The door opened on a chain, and then all the way. A woman stood in the gap holding a kerosene lantern because the storm had taken the power out somewhere up the line. She was small and straight-backed, maybe in her mid-70s, with white hair pinned up neat and a wool cardigan buttoned to the throat. Her eyes were a pale, clear gray, and they moved over him once, top to bottom. The soaked jacket, the canvas bag, the exhaustion he couldn't hide, and settled on his face. "I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am," Cole said. His voice came out rougher than he meant it. "My truck's broke down a ways back. I've been walking. I don't need anything from you. I just wondered if I could lie down in your barn tonight. Out of the weather. I'll be gone before light." She didn't answer that. Instead, she said, "When did you last eat?" He almost lied. Then he saw there wasn't any point. "Yesterday morning." For a moment, she just looked at him, and the lantern light shook a little in her hand. Then she stepped back and pulled the door wide. "You're not sleeping in that barn," she said. "The roof leaks and it's 10 degrees. Come in before you lose a toe." "I couldn't." "You already knocked. That means life walked you far enough down the road that a stranger's door looked like mercy." She turned toward the kitchen. "Wipe your boots." The house smelled like wood smoke and beef stew and something older underneath. Something like cedar and thyme. It smelled like a home, the kind he hadn't stood inside since he was a boy. She lit a second lamp on the kitchen table and set out a bowl without asking whether he wanted it. "Della," she said, ladling. "Della Hartline. And you'll tell me your name before you tell me you're not hungry, because I can see that you are." Cole Barrett." He sat because his legs told him to. "Thank you. I mean it." She sat across from him and watched him eat the way you watch someone you're deciding about. On the wall behind her, in the wavering light, hung a row of framed photographs, and one thing that wasn't a photograph, a scorched yellow helmet with a mesh face cage, the kind smoke jumpers wear when they parachute into a wildfire. He didn't ask. Not that night. "You in trouble, Cole Barrett?" she said. He gave a tired laugh. At this point, mostly out of luck. Della didn't smile. Bad luck sticks to people who've quit believing they've got any good luck coming. I've watched it happen to better men than you. She tore a piece of bread and pushed the plate closer. Eat. Through the window over the sink, out past the porch, he could see the shape of a smaller outbuilding, a shop, low and long, with something big under a canvas tarp inside it that the lamplight barely reached. He filed it away without meaning to. Old habit. His hands always wanted to know what a place was hiding. If a stranger has ever shown you kindness when you had nothing to give back, tell me about it down in the comments. I read them. Now stay with me, because this is where everything starts to turn. He woke at dawn in a narrow guest room off the stairs, under a quilt that smelled like cedar, and for a full minute, he didn't know where he was. Then he heard it, the scrape and grunt of someone dragging something heavy across frozen ground. He found Della out by the hay barn in the gray light, wrestling a 50-pound feed sack she had no business lifting, her breath smoking in the cold. "You should have woke me," he said, taking it from her. "And you should stop looking like the world owes you an apology," she said, but there was no heat in it. She let him take the next one, too. They fed out together. The ranch he could see now in daylight had been a good one once and was slowly losing the fight. Fences sagged. The corrals were empty. The hay barn's ridgeline dipped in the middle like a spine that had given up. Over the next hour, in the plain way ranch people talk while their hands are busy, he learned her losses. Her husband, Walt, had built this place board by board over 40 years. He'd been a welder and a blacksmith before he was a rancher, and half the ironwork in 3 counties, the gates, the weather vanes, the branding irons, had come out of his shop. He'd been gone 4 winters now. A stroke, fast, at the kitchen table. And their son. Danny. That was the scorched helmet on the wall. Danny had been a smoke jumper, the best kind of reckless, and 11 summers ago a fire on a ridge in Idaho had turned on the crew and the wind had done what wind does. He was 26. "After that, it's mostly been me in the quiet," Della said. She flexed her hands inside her gloves. The knuckles were swollen and stiff. "I used to play the fiddle, every Saturday at the Grange, 40 years running. These don't let me anymore." She said it without self-pity, like reporting the weather. Cole didn't say he was sorry. He'd learned a long time ago that sorry was cheap. Instead, he looked up at the barn's failing roof, and years of steel and welds and load-bearing math came up in him all at once. "That main truss is cracked at the heel," he said. "See where it's pulling away? Another heavy snow and the whole west side comes down. But it's fixable. The frame underneath is still sound. It just needs bracing and a couple of new steel plates welded in." Della squinted at him. "With what money?" "I didn't say hire anyone." He wiped his hands on his jeans. "I said I can fix it. I'm a structural welder. Ran crews on bridge jobs, wind towers, grain elevators. 15 years. He shrugged. "You fed me. Let me earn the bed." She studied him a long, careful moment, the way she'd looked at him in the doorway. "You'd work for nothing." "I've got nothing else to do with my hands," he said. "And they're getting itchy." For the first time, Della Hartline smiled all the way. And it took 20 years off her face. Here's what Cole didn't know yet. On the counter by the door sat a stack of mail she never opened in front of him. Thick envelopes from a law office in Bozeman, 3 of them, all with the same return address. And twice that first morning, the phone rang, and Della looked at the number and let it ring. The truck came up the drive on the 4th afternoon, a big, clean dually with dealer plates, while Cole was up on a ladder tacking a brace into place. Della's whole body went stiff before the man had even opened his door. He was maybe 50, in a canvas jacket that had never seen work, with the easy walk of a man used to being welcomed. He didn't knock. He came right into the yard. "Aunt Della," he said, warm as anything. "You've got the power back on, I see. And help." His eyes went up the ladder to Cole and cooled by 10 degrees. "Didn't know you were hiring." "What do you want, Garrett?" Della's voice had gone flat and hard. Cole came down the ladder slow. Garrett Voss was Walt's nephew, his late sister's boy, and he ran a land company out of Bozeman that bought up ranches and flipped the pieces. The water rights to one buyer, the acreage to a subdivision, the barnwood to a reclamation dealer. He'd been circling the Hartline place for 3 years. I came about the ranch, Garrett said, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. Della, we've been over this. The taxes on this section are going to bury you. There's a boundary question on the North Field that a court could tie up for years and cost you everything to fight. I've got a buyer who'll take the whole thing, clean, this month, and I've got a signed option from Uncle Walt that gives me first right regardless. He spread his hands. I'm trying to save you from yourself here. Sell to me before this all falls down around you. Walt never signed you anything, Della said. It was a handshake, and then paper. You know how he was. Garrett's smile didn't move, but something underneath it did. He glanced at the freshly braced barn and gave a small laugh. You paying this drifter to prop up a barn you're about to lose? That's throwing good money after nothing. He's not costing me a dime, Cole said quietly. Garrett looked at him then, really looked, and dismissed him just as fast. Charity work. Cute. It won't save the place. He turned back to Della. I'll give you the week. Then my buyer moves on, and the next offer you get won't be from family. He put his hat back on. Think about it, Aunt Della. Think hard. The dually pulled out. The dust hung in the cold air a long time. Della sat down on the porch step like her strings had been cut. Cole sat beside her, not too close. He's been at this since Walt died, she said, staring at nothing. Every few months, a little more pressure, a little scarier each time. He knows I'm alone, and he knows I'm old, and he's just waiting for me to break. Her hands were shaking. Walt built this with his own 2 hands, and I can't fight a lawyer. Cole looked at the barn, at the son's helmet he could see through the window, at this woman who'd fed a stranger in a storm. Then don't fight the lawyer, he said. Find the paper. A man like Walt, a man who did everything right his whole life, he didn't leave this to a handshake. He turned to her. Did he ever say anything about how the place was set up? A will? A deed? Anything? Della was quiet a long moment. There's a box, she said slowly. A fireproof box in the closet. Walt handled all of that his own way before he passed. He kept telling me it was taken care of, the right way. I never opened it. I couldn't. Her voice cracked, just once. It felt like opening him. We'll open it together, Cole said, when you're ready. He gave her 2 days. He spent them finishing the barn. By the time he pulled the last brace tight, the swayback ridge sat straight for the first time in a decade, plated and welded and true. And on the second evening, restless, he wandered into the long shop out back and pulled the canvas tarp off the shape that had nagged at him since the first night. Underneath was a forge, an honest coal forge, and beside it an anvil the size of a hay bale, and a wall of hammers and tongs hung in careful order, everything oiled, everything waiting, like Walt had just stepped out for a minute 11 years ago and never come back. Cole stood there in the dark and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. His father had taught him the forge before he ever taught him welding. He'd given it up for the money on the big jobs, told himself it was a hobby, a thing for men who could afford to be slow. He put his hand flat on the cold anvil and something in his chest came loose. When he told Della the next morning that he'd like to fire it up, just to see, she looked at him for a long moment and then handed him Walt's leather apron off the peg. He'd have hated it sitting cold, she said. They opened the box that afternoon. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was everything a careful man leaves behind. And near the bottom, stamped and certified with the raised seal of the Sweetgrass County Recorder in the corner, were 2 documents that changed the whole shape of things. The first was a transfer on death deed, recorded 11 years back. the same year they lost Danny. Walt had put the ranch into a form that passed straight to Della on his death and could not be sold out from under her, with no option, no lien, no first right belonging to anyone. Not Garrett. Not anybody. The second was heavier. It was a conservation easement, recorded the same day that Walt had placed on the entire property in Danny's name, tied to a land trust. It permanently barred the land from being subdivided or developed. Forever. A rancher could ranch it. A family could live on it. But no developer could ever carve it into lots. Della held it in her stiff hands and read it twice, and then she pressed it to her mouth and wept, once, quietly, and put it down. "He never told me," she whispered. "He did all this after Danny died, and he never said a word. He just wanted to know it was safe. It was his way of keeping Danny on the land," Cole said. Garrett's whole play collapsed on that paper. There was no option, because Walt had legally made one impossible. There was no developer buyer, because the easement made development illegal. The boundary question was a bluff. Cole found Walt's recorded survey in the same box, filed and stamped, settling the north field beyond argument. They didn't call Garrett. Cole drove Della into Big Timber the next morning to the county recorder's office, where a woman named Pearl, who'd known Della for 50 years, pulled the originals, confirmed every recording date, and made certified copies with the county seal pressed deep into the corner. "These are ironclad, Della," Pearl said, sliding them across the counter. "Walt did this the right way. Whatever that nephew's been telling you, it's smoke." She lowered her voice. "And honey, pressuring a widow to sign away a place she legally can't lose? There's a name for that. You ought to let a few people know." Word travels in ranch country. By the time Cole and Della drove home, 3 neighbors had already called the house. I've got to say it. This is the part that gets me every time. A quiet man who did everything the right way, protecting the 2 things he loved most, years after he was gone. If a story about kindness and second chances means something to you, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button so the next one finds you. Now let's finish this. Garrett Voss came back on the day his week was up, and he brought a lawyer this time, and a man in a pressed shirt who smelled like a closing. He came expecting to find a frightened old woman alone in a failing house. What he found was a straight barn, a forge with smoke rising from the stack. 3 neighboring ranchers leaned against their trucks in the yard, Pearl from the county office sitting in her car, and Della Hartline standing on her own porch in Walt's old wool coat with a folder in her hands and Cole Barrett beside her. Garrett slowed halfway across the yard. "Quite a welcoming party," he said, recovering. "Aunt Della, my buyer's here to sign. I'd hate for you to embarrass yourself in front of the neighbors." "Then I won't," Della said. She came down the steps, unhurried, and handed the folder not to Garrett, but to his lawyer. "That's a certified copy of the recorded deed," she said. "You'll see this ranch passed directly to me the day Walt died, with no option belonging to your client. That's the recorded survey settling the North Field, so there's no boundary to fight. And that," she tapped the last page, "is a conservation easement my husband recorded 11 years ago in our son's name. This land can never be subdivided or developed. Not by me, not by anyone. Your buyer cannot build here. There is nothing to buy." The lawyer read. His face changed the way faces change when the ground moves. He leaned to Garrett and murmured something, and the man in the pressed shirt was already walking back to his car. Garrett's easy smile finally broke. "This is... Walt never..." He looked at Pearl, at the neighbors, at the folder, at the trap that had been sitting under him for 11 years. "You've been sitting on this the whole time?" "No," Della said. "I never opened that box until a stranger I fed in a storm reminded me that my husband was a man who did things the right way." She looked at Garrett steadily. "You spent 3 years trying to make me feel too small and too tired and too alone to look, and the whole time, Walt had already beaten you. He just did it quietly, the way he did everything. There was nothing to negotiate. You can't negotiate against a recorded deed. Garrett's lawyer was already backing toward the truck. The buyer was gone. Garrett stood alone in the yard with every neighbor watching, and, for the first time, he had no smile, and no paper, and no play. You should be grateful anyone in this family bothered with you at all, he said, and it came out small. I'm grateful for the ones who did, Della said, and looked at the men in the yard, and at Cole. Drive safe, Garrett. He drove off, and this time the dust settled fast, and nobody watched it go. 10 months later, the old hay barn stands straight against the Montana sky, and the long shop beside it glows orange past dark most nights. Walt's forge runs hot again. Cole Barrett works it dawn to dusk, hand-forged gate latches and weather vanes, restored branding irons, heavy furniture with legs. He forges himself and tops of reclaimed barnwood. Word got out the way it does. People drive in from 4 counties now. There's a hand-painted sign at the cattle gate where the leaning mailbox used to be. Barrett and Hartline Forge Works. Hartline was Walt's name. Cole insisted on it, and Della argued for exactly 1 round before she gave in and turned away so he wouldn't see her face. Danny's smoke jumper helmet still hangs on the kitchen wall. The easement in his name is framed beside it now. Della sits on the porch most evenings with a cup of tea gone lukewarm in her stiff hands, listening to the ring of the hammer, and some nights the neighbors come by, and one of them brings a fiddle and plays the old Saturday tunes so she can hear them even if she can't make them anymore. And every single night, no matter how the day ran, there are 2 plates set at the kitchen table. Neither of them ever says why. Neither of them has to. He came to that door asking for 1 night in a barn, out of the weather, expecting to be gone before light. He never did leave, because sometimes the smallest mercy, a bowl of stew, a door held open against a storm, isn't small at all. Sometimes it's the hinge the rest of a life turns on. She thought she was saving a stranger from the cold. She was saving herself from the quiet. And he thought he'd lost everything worth having. He just hadn't walked far enough up the road yet to find it. If this one reached you, tell me down in the comments. Would you have opened your door that night? And where are you watching from? I love seeing where you all are. If stories like this one are what you come here for, subscribe and stay with us, because there's another one coming next week. Until then, be the door somebody needs.